Thank you very much, President, and good morning just about to all AGM delegates and visitors. I wanted to start by echoing the President's thanks to David Edwards for that really inspirational address that he made to AGM, giving us a really clear picture of the power of trade union work and solidarity across borders on a global scale. And just coincidentally, when I was driving up here on Wednesday afternoon, I received an email from one of my sisters who is alongside me on the European Trade Union Committee on Education, Katerina Maliuta, and she was writing to me on behalf of the President of the Trade Union of Education and Science Workers of Ukraine, making an appeal for EIS solidarity for the teachers, the educators in Ukraine at the moment. And I'm just going to read you a few of the words that they put to us, and I hope that you will then join me in sending our solidarity to our comrades in Ukraine at the moment. So they said, by supporting Ukrainian educators, you're supporting the people who are keeping communities together, educating the next generation and helping to build the future of a democratic and peaceful Ukraine. In times of war, solidarity is not about sympathy. It's a powerful act of shared responsibility and common humanity. Together we can ensure that Ukrainian children continue to learn, teachers continue to teach, and hope continues to prevail. And I think that very, very strongly echoes a lot of what David was saying in his address too. So I hope that we can send our solidarity to fellow educators in Ukraine who are trying their absolute best to continue education in the most difficult of circumstances for children and young people over there. And we call for an end to that war, and we call for peace and for peaceful conflict resolution going forward. So I hope that you can join me right now in that. And I will write to Katerina and advise her that that was the response to that request just there now. Going on to the report itself, I'll resume my kind of what I planned to say to you. I want to start by saying that the view from up here is great, right? It's really great. We can see, all of us who are sitting up here can see unity, we can see togetherness, and we can see common values, common purpose, and that is absolutely a sight to behold. 350 members from across all 32 of our local associations and our 2 self-governing associations, all of you representing 80% of teachers and lecturers in Scotland, almost 65,000 members who are bound together by belief in the value of quality education, bound by belief in the societal worth of our professionalism as teachers and lecturers, and bound together by trade union values and solidarity within a union whose members are from all sectors of Scottish education at all career stages. A union who cares about teachers and lecturers and about pupils and students in equal measure. That is quite something. Colleagues, our unity as trade union educators is absolutely our strength. We, every single one of us here at the EIS's 180th AGM, are guided by the same motto that signposted the way forward for our predecessors at the very first AGM in 1847. For the advancement of teachers and the promotion of sound learning. That motto has strongly stood the test of time. It's lasted as a guiding principle to the EIS and its members for 179 years, withstood a raft of political and geopolitical crises, colonial wars, world wars, financial crashes, periods of economic depression, the first rise of fascism, the Holocaust, the Cold War, a global pandemic, ongoing conflict in the Middle East, and here at home, the human sacrifice of working class communities on the altar of capitalist greed, and the unending economic and human cost of neoliberal ideology being hammered into our public services, including our education system, and our education system that is and must be treated and funded as the quintessential social good that it absolutely is. For the advancement of teachers and the promotion of sound learning will be our collective creed as we navigate another age of monsters, to quote Gramsci. And a resurgence of the far right and the politics of hate and division, bankrolled by billionaires whose avarice, hubris and complete lack of conscience are unfathomable, unconscionable to decent people like you all are here. Colleagues, the wolves are no longer at the door, they're in the door, as the recent Scottish Parliament election result attests. Local elections are coming round next year. Still more, our unity must be our strength. Still more, our motto, penned in 1847, is and must continue to be our guiding and our binding maxim. We must continue to resist the profit before people economic paradigm that's created a society riven with inequality, that sees our public services on their knees, including education, and our social security system in ruins, living standards in free fall, and levels of poverty and deprivation still rising yet, meaning that more and more of our young people are suffering serious educational disadvantage. It's no accident, colleagues, no accident, comrades, that 43% of our pupils have a recognised additional support need now. A failure of government, the right to education is being frustrated by the gross insufficiency of funding for ASN provision. And we need to be very careful to give no ground to the voices on the right that are now harping even louder for the dismantling of inclusive education and the abandonment of the presumption to mainstream. The EIS absolutely will defend that principle, with all the rigour and vigour that we have got in us, and we will continue with all the rigour and vigour that we have within us to argue for its appropriate resourcing. All of this that I've outlined here is the architecture of the mega wealth holders who calculate that their interests can be best served by fanning the flames of racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, ableism, all of those things. All textbook tactics to try to divide and conquer working class communities, ordinary people. We've seen this in history before, and we know where it leads if it goes unchallenged, if it's allowed to go unchallenged, and the EIS will absolutely not allow that. So the EIS does stand up and challenge the narratives of division and hate, and offers a hopeful alternative at the same time as holding the UK and the Scottish governments to account on their failures to deliver for our citizens. Their accountability for the sense of futility and fatalism that are an absolute gift to the far right. Our Stand Up for Quality Education campaign, our manifesto for the recent election are key, they're absolutely key. And that's why we'll continue to echo the demands that we made in that manifesto. More teachers, including in early years, smaller classes, better ASN provision and universal free school meals. Scotland could have all of this for less than £1 billion of additional spending on education each year. And as the Institute for Public Policy Research in Scotland said, it's not an insignificant sum of money, but the benefits of it vastly outweigh the costs. So spend now for the common good, save multiple times over on corrective spending from the public purse later, invest more now in education across all sectors for the benefit of our whole society longer term, because that's exactly what education should be, for the common good. It should not be a competition between students for grades, or between schools for inspection scores, exclusion rates, or insight points, or a competition between local authorities on the raft of measures that feature in the National Improvement Framework league tables. Education should be about collaboration because, as David Edwards was saying earlier, it is a human endeavour. So it should be about collaboration, working together for the common good and ring-fencing the resources to do it. The education provided in our nurseries, schools, colleges and universities should benefit our pupils and students, their families and communities now and right into the future. Less inequality, better health outcomes, greater prosperity, less interaction with the justice system for our citizens. Preventative spend, comrades, it's a no-brainer. And that's why EIS Feel It as well is campaigning for greater investment in further education, and the work that we are doing to press for better funding for HE. These things are absolutely on the same page as everything else that I've been outlining. These are in large part about creating that alternative vision and holding government to account on the underfunding of education from early years all the way through to higher education. And we do this because it's the right thing to do, but increasingly we do it because we know and we understand that education is a critical antidote to the poison of far-right politics. We need a well-funded education system from early years to higher education so that teachers and lecturers, we can teach young people to read and write, to think critically, to problem solve and to create, so that we have what we need to educate the young people in our nurseries, schools, colleges and universities for equality, social justice, peace and democracy itself. That's what sound learning looks like. That's what sound learning looks like. It's how we build for a future of bread and roses and books, a future that rejects hate, a future that is truly hopeful. Creating opportunities for political education, the many good men in the Tackling Misinformation and Disinformation resources, the Let's Change the Story video series, the reps and member briefings working with TUC and STUC on how we organise a trade union response to the far right. It's why all of that matters, and it's why the work of our equality convener, Nicola Fisher, Vice Convener of Equality, Claire Robertson, and the OBs, that's Adam's still here, Mark and Alan, that's why the work that they've been putting in over the course of the last year absolutely matters, and I thank all of them for that. Yep. And it's why it matters that we joined the Together Alliance as soon as it was formed, why I spoke on our behalf at the inaugural conference in London back in January, and why we answered the call to help fund a demo, and why we marched with 500,000 others who were prepared to be seen and heard on the streets of central London on the 28th of March, seen and heard as the alternatives to the politics of division and hate. That was a no-passaran moment, if ever there was one. When the EIS delegation got to the end of the march gathering at Whitehall, and we heard the announcement that there were still thousands waiting to march off from Park Lane, it was another of those moments when the realisation of the collective strength and power of good people makes you shiver, right? It was one of those moments. I think I was actually on the verge of tears, if not in tears, and I think a few others felt similarly. It was another unforgettable occasion that the EIS showed up for and was proud to show up for. And it's why it matters that the EIS is credited as a donor to the making of the Everybody to Kenmure Street film, winner of one of the major awards at the Cannes Film Festival last year. And early last year, just at the start of this cycle, we contributed substantial funds to the making of the film, which, if you haven't seen it, tells the brilliant story of the collective power of the people of Glasgow standing up against the politics of inhumanity and hate. And again, it was lovely to have some cameo appearances from some of our very good people in that film as well. No pointing elbows, right? The President and I were invited to attend the UK premiere of the film at the GFT. And another occasion where we were bursting with pride in the EIS and the strength of our solidarity with others who are standing up for the common good. It was an absolutely outstanding occasion. You know, we're preparing to get involved in screenings of the film ourselves and in the creation of an education resource, so there's much more important work to come on that particular film. And all of that work is essential, and it's why we'll continue to press the Scottish Government to work with us on the last of the 3 ISTP agreements that we made with them in 2025. That agreement committed us to three key things, right? That one in and of itself, 3 key things. 1, ensure all children and young people develop the knowledge, understanding, skills and capacities to enable them to thrive and to shape the world in the interests of equality, democracy, peace, and social and climate justice. 2, recognise the critical role of teachers in this complex endeavour and the need to support them and to trust in their professionalism. And 3, work together to ensure the right balance in the curriculum at all stages, because I was very much of the view that if we've got young people doing standardised test after standardised test after standardised test and no room in the curriculum for them to focus on things that really do matter, then we're going to struggle. But that agreement and that the terms of that agreement are actually code for challenging the influence of the far right. Those of us who were sitting around that table at ISTP knew exactly what we were talking about, but we put it in language that was going to be just, you know, a little bit more subtle. But that means that we've got an in with government on this, agenda, and we'll be working to score a hat trick in getting all 3 of the 2025 ISTP commitments that we made fully delivered, because we've actually won on the other 2 as well. We hope that motion 57 on building a political education strategy that Mark is going to move on behalf of Council will pass with the solid support of AGM, because it's important, colleagues, that we educate ourselves, think about how we frame conversations on topics that the far right are hijacking, how we build trust and show empathy with the people that we're talking to, and how we win hearts and minds ultimately away from the lure of the far right and the division and the hate that they represent. How we work in solidarity with our comrades, not just saying solidarity, but doing it, doing solidarity with kindness, care, concern for our colleagues, and of course, in amongst all of that, self-care as well, so that we build our collective strength and courage to continue our industrial struggles, stand up for quality education, stand up for equality and social justice, and for peace, and to step up the fight against the influence of the far right. And we've been doing all of those things over the past year. Everything, everywhere, all at once. I think that's right, Alan, is that right? So standing up for teachers and lecturers, standing up for Scottish education, standing up for rights, standing up for peace and for social justice, alongside the rest of the trade union movement in Scotland, the UK, and internationally, as we heard, as we were hearing from David. It's been our raison d'etre over the last 12 months. And at last year's AGM, we demonstrated our willingness to up the ante on the SNCT workload dispute. We launched the first of 3 ballots with the press of that big red button, the visual display of your intent to really fight for what you were promised across a 9-month campaign that leveraged a tangible result. A contractual change that will significantly and permanently improve the working conditions of teachers and the learning conditions of pupils. Our collective know-how and our collective strength as a union, from branch to local association to EIS headquarters, all parts of the EIS working together, putting in the hard yards, won that victory for Scotland's teachers and kept us true to our mission. Absolutely incredible. And I want to say thank you to every single person in here for the part that you played in securing that victory by being ballot strong and strike ready. And thank you too to all the EIS colleagues who aren't here but who did their bit as well. It was a massive, massive collective effort, and that second ballot result was an absolute game changer. The hour before that result was announced, I can tell you there was nothing on the table from the Scottish Government, not even a response to the draft agreement that Stuart Brown and myself and Des drafted for them, and that was then approved by the wider teachers panel. No response to that, and it had been provided to them weeks before. A draft agreement that included phased implementation in pragmatic acknowledgement of the significant shortfall in the numbers of secondary teachers that EIS members, our own EIS secondary colleagues, had pointed out was a significant issue that needed to be addressed. No response to the teacher side proposed terms of agreement, and no alternative on the table until after that ballot result came in. A Scottish Government gamble that the anti-trade union thresholds would thwart us for a second time. That's what they were absolutely hoping and praying for. But they didn't beat us a second time, because when we fell short by only a few hundred votes the first time around, we didn't press the panic button. We kept cool, we kept cool heads, we analysed, we strategised even harder, and we tenaciously went after a mandate, and we got it. We got it. So the following day after the announcement, with the thresholds well beaten and an overwhelming majority in favour of strike and ASOS, and we surmise after a meeting with the First Minister, the Cabinet Secretary urgently wanted to talk to us, talk to the EIS, because our members, you, were the ones that were about to go out on strike. So we met that afternoon, and the Scottish Government began to show all of us and COSLA the money and their late in the day intent to get a settlement before EIS members began taking strike action in a matter of days. So we met the Scottish Government every day for 5 days after that, and although things were moving in the right direction, and in large part that was thanks to Des and Mick as our salaries convener and vice convener, we kept up the national and local effort across those days on preparing for that industrial action, taking nothing for granted, counting no chickens, nothing agreed till everything was agreed. Anyone paying attention, and we know that the Scottish Government, with an election just around the corner and having written the EIS's name right at the top of the risk register, not kidding, we're paying very close attention, but anyone would have seen that our members were dead serious about taking that strike action if it came to it. So the pressure on the government that came from seeing that tens of thousands of EIS members were limbering up to take strike action that would shut schools, including in key constituency areas, during an election campaign, and that would see action short of strike and associated publicity go on right up until the election, that's what forced the Scottish Government to fold on the use of the time. The full 90 minutes would go to preparation and correction. Our red line met. And the Scottish Government also agreed to go as far and as fast as it could on national implementation of class contact reduction, and go as far and as fast as they could on the actual doing it. We pushed back very strongly against a proposal of piecemeal implementation across a handful of local authorities at a time, and then who knows what would happen after that. We insisted on national implementation on a sectoral basis because of the situation in terms of the workforce, including that pragmatic concession around phasing for all the reasons that I've outlined already. And the whole implementation would be fully funded by the Scottish Government, full funding, no cuts to other parts of the education service, no additional workload for head teachers, deputy head teachers and principal teachers. Again, another demand of the EIS met. So in less than a week after the EIS secured a clear mandate with overwhelming support for strike action and ASOS, our terms were on the verge of being met. 90 minutes for teachers to use for preparation and correction, a credible timescale for implementation, and fully funded. Those were our terms. And that just left the small matter of gaining the agreement of COSLA. So in a dramatic tilt of the axis of negotiations, the EIS and the Scottish Government partnered up to lobby COSLA really hard over the 24 hours or so before the leaders' meeting that was scheduled for the Friday, before the Monday that our members were set to take action. So, Cabinet Secretary and I wrote jointly, it was a very good letter, to COSLA leaders the day before their meeting and lobbied individual councillors and MSPs with sway over COSLA leaders really hard. And it worked, because COSLA leaders overwhelmingly voted to support the deal, which meant it could then be proposed to the full teachers panel of the SNCT, where it got the majority of our sister trade unions' support. So that was great. We did it. We got it over the line, a deal to cut workload and to create jobs, because that's what that deal boils down to, cutting workload and creating jobs. And an additional £40 million right now to start getting more teachers into our schools. That money was made available right there and then. So right now, starting to tackle the precarity that has plagued our profession for years. All of this in preparation for full implementation of the contractual change for primary by August next year. And with agreement around a workforce planning focus at the SNCT to at last allow us to intelligently respond to the recruitment challenges to enable secondary implementation by 2029. And colleagues who have a certain year's experience, let's put it that way, will remember that a similar phased approach was adopted 20 years ago or so, when the last significant contractual changes to the working week were being implemented. So that was with secondary going first that time around, and primary colleagues following a few years later. The acceptance of phasing based on a grasp of the real politic of the situation at the time, and underpinned by the principle that a victory for one sector is a victory for all sectors. So that rationale underpinned the thinking of the negotiators. And this latest win will be felt by all teachers in nursery, primary, secondary and special schools well within the lifetime of this Parliament. Now, there hasn't been too much time to pause and reflect on the strength of what's been achieved, but I do remember driving to Glasgow on the M8 back from the SNP conference that took place the day after we got that deal over the line. You know, that really kind of dramatic council meeting that I think Adam referred to in his speech as well. I think I got to about Bathgate or something heading back to Glasgow, and there was something of a realisation that we'd achieved something big, something that will improve the professional and personal lives of teachers for decades to come, all through our collective strength as a union. And again, that was another one of those moments that brought shivers down my spine. Massive, massive pride in what you and your colleagues back in their local associations achieved for everyone. And this one on workload should inspire all of us to double down on workload otherwise, through working time agreements and workload audits at branch level. Because there are no silver bullets, no panaceas, no effortless shortcuts to fair, healthy and sustainable workload and good work-life balance. There are no shortcuts to those things. It takes constant, relentless vigilance and collective surveillance, and EIS members need to be up for that across all 39 of the 35-hour working weeks of the year. Not individually, but collectively, and I know that you absolutely will be up for that. Unity is our strength, not just nationally, but in our branches too. Because 90 additional minutes a week is coming, but it's not here yet, and even when it does arrive, it won't make excessive workload disappear. And with a new Cabinet Secretary for Public Sector Reform, aka public sector cuts, installed in the Scottish Government, we will need to stay absolutely on our mettle and be prepared to resist attempts to cut corners on delivering on the full terms of the agreement that our ballot and the threat of our industrial action and the tenacity of our negotiating has just won. We expect the terms to be delivered in full with sufficient numbers of primary, secondary and special school teachers to be able to deliver quality, human-centred, in-person teaching and learning to all of our pupils. No backsliding, no cheap workarounds. Digital as a default won't do. So the EIS will continue to demand better, just as we did after last year's AGM, when the Poverty Alliance called on the trade union movement to help build a campaign for government action against poverty and for better funded public services ahead of the Scottish Parliament election. So we donated funds to build that campaign and made sure that we had a strong presence at the demo in Edinburgh last October, where thousands marched demanding better ahead of the recent election. But judging by the party manifestos and the new cabinet post created for Ivan McKee, the trade union movement and the rest of civil society has got much more work to do to leverage a fairer distribution of wealth and stronger support for public services in Scotland. And the EIS will continue to make our contribution to that effort, making our mark and standing up for quality education as we have done over the past year. On the industrial front, we've been defending jobs and course provision with strike action at the University of the West of Scotland and Edinburgh Napier, in both cases getting compulsory redundancies off the table. So it was EIS, ULA unity and collective strength, protecting the livelihoods of members and the quality of education at these institutions. So congratulations to them on the success of their action. And all power to members at GCU and Queen Margaret as they prepare to do exactly the same thing. And keeping up the fight against pensions raiding by independent school employers who continue to try to pay for freezes on pupil fees off the backs of our members. As in Hutchie, EMS and Craigclowen, where EIS members are prepared to defend their rights as workers, the EIS will be right with them. Standing up for our members' health and safety at Lenzie Academy and Linvale Academy, getting the Dunbartonshires to agree to do better and make these schools safer for staff and pupils by balloting our members. Battling hard on health and safety at City of Glasgow College, where our members and their students continue, as we've been hearing, to be refused respiratory protective equipment that would reduce the risk from carcinogenic welding fumes to as low as reasonably practicable. BAE welders are sent to the college, apprentice welders are sent to the college to be taught welding wearing that kit. It's absurd and it's unacceptable that their lecturers are not provided it by their employer. So the EIS, as you would expect, has been pushing the college really, really hard. That's a story, but I won't go into it right now. We've been pushing the college very hard, and the principal has agreed to meet with me at my earliest convenience. I got that email, I think, again, it was when I was driving up here on Wednesday, so there's been a bit of back and forward. My earliest convenience, I said it was Monday morning. As it is, we will be meeting on Monday. It'll be 5 o'clock on Monday. That's to suit his diary. But I expect that we're going to, well, I absolutely expect that we're going to make some significant progress come Monday afternoon. Aside from pressing hard on the college, we have been putting our arms around the striking welders and the reps, because we absolutely understand that, especially when it comes to health and safety, an injury to one is an injury to all, and we simply won't have it. And I want to thank Susan Slater and Jackie for the full square support that they've given around these various health and safety issues that have been live across several swathes of EIS campaigning, and particularly the City of Glasgow College dispute. They're absolutely unequivocal that the EIS has to stand up to the City of Glasgow College, has to put the maximum resource that we have into winning that dispute, because that is totemic for the whole health and safety agenda across Scotland, not just in the FE sector. So thank you to both of them for all of their support. On the education front, a different type of safety issue, and based on another of those ISTP agreements that I mentioned, we drove the work that's led to the publication in March of a set of ethical guardrails and guidelines for AI use in Scottish education, a really good piece of work in response to the Wild West approach to AI that was beginning to take hold in some local authorities. So that work all initiated by the EIS, both at the conference itself and then in terms of what happened afterwards. And I just want to say that there's nothing artificial about the intelligence of the EIS officers and officials who worked on that and many other things besides. I mean, that was hard going. That AI stuff was hard going. But, aside from that, our officers and officials working behind the scenes have won major concessions on the legislative front, holding the Scottish Government and Parliament to account, fielding swathes of amendments to bills to ensure that the policy that you decide here and at Council is reflected in the legislation that affects our schools, our members and the learners in our settings. So this year, our amendments have strengthened teacher voice in the governance structures of Qualifications Scotland through the new Education Act, significantly narrowed the definition of restraint in the Restraint and Seclusion in Schools Act, forced the government to rethink implementation timescales of the well-meaning but significantly under-resourced Residential Outdoor Education Act, and secured legislative guarantees through the Tertiary Education Act that colleges and universities remain primary fundable bodies, not private providers. A major win in standing up for quality education, and that's just a snapshot. And I want to thank Susan and Colin for their work on the Education Committee, supporting all of that and so much more. Anybody who attends Council and gets their bundle of papers will see that it's a tome, and Susan, poor Susan, is on her feet reporting massively on the breadth, the depth, the scale of the work that goes on in that Education Committee. So thank you for all of that. And all of this has been ongoing while we continue to advocate for meaningful education reform. Many of you in this room have given your time and expertise to contribute to the review of Curriculum for Excellence, shaping the curriculum improvement cycle in an attempt to declutter, streamline and align the senior phase finally with the BGE. And we'll continue to stand together, united, to ensure that the voices of all teachers from all sectors are heard as we move forward, no matter who's in charge at Education Scotland and no matter who is the Cabinet Secretary for Education. And as we move forward, we will press the new Cabinet Secretary on the implementation of the recommendations of the Independent Review of Qualifications and Assessment. Remember that. The Scottish Government might think that they've kicked that into the long grass, but the EIS hasn't lost sight of the consensual vision of an alternative senior phase that, if realised, would transform the experiences of teachers, children and young people and provide genuinely sound learning that's rooted in social justice. We will not lose sight of that. And we'll continue the solid work in local associations that's undertaken by our cadre of reps and LA secretaries, upon whom the excellent work of the EIS depends, supported by our brilliant team of area officers and organisers as well. Colleagues, there are no shortcuts to building union power in branches and building union power nationally. It's the hard graft of educating, agitating, organising, rinse and repeat. But when we do the hard work as a union, we reap the rewards for our members, and that makes all of it worthwhile, and worthwhile doing again and again and again. And in the current economic and fiscal climate, unfortunately, it looks like there's no end in sight to that hard graft in the next number of years. But as well as fighting one battle at a time, we keep our eyes on the bigger prize that the trade union movement is after. A fairer, more equal, more socially just society in which wealth is more equally distributed, a society that's free of discrimination and where everyone can thrive. We keep our eyes on the prize, and we keep an eye on one another as well. We don't forget to check that everybody's doing okay, because things are getting even tougher, and as a union we've been fighting hard for years now. And people aren't machines. The robots haven't replaced us yet, thankfully. So remember to look after yourselves and to look after each other. Unity is our strength as we continue to stand up for quality education and the fight for the common good. And colleagues, I was trying really hard not to litter this speech with football references, because I know that some people don't like football, and I was trying to be, inclusive. But I'm just going to end with this, right? Comrades, colleagues, they think the General Secretary's speech is all over. It is now. Solidarity, solidarity.